going down? It's your boy Juicy J.
Welcome back to the Hip Hop Report. My name is Rambo Hustle, and after about 2 days of listening to Kanye West's new album Bully, I can honestly tell you he's still got it. There's a lot of doubt, and obviously we've all had our own share of ups and downs or highs and lows with Sir Kanye West throughout the years. Obviously he's a guy that definitely takes controversy to a whole new level, manipulating the audience, manipulating the people, not just through social media, but his own music, his antics. But if there's one thing that we always known about Kanye West throughout the years, is that his music delivers. Whether you think I See Ghosts is a complete flop, I can still show you 2 or 3 records on that project that are just musically incredible and just above most of the competition. Yes, sir. How can I help you? With that being said, and before I get bullied, you have to know that Kanye West isn't just another rapper. Kanye West isn't just another producer. He's the producer and rapper that your favorite producer and rapper from this generation wants to be like. And if they don't, it's because they've evolved or they're past that generation. In a lot of ways, this project is a merger or a consolidation of all the sounds we've ever gotten with Kanye. I would say the only thing that's kind of missing is maybe the Yeezus era, but at the same time, you kind of hear that on Father, especially with the synths and the way that he's, the aggressiveness of the music. I would even argue that this project almost takes us through maybe 2 decades of Kanye West, so to speak. From the beginning of the project, the first 3 records almost all seem like intros, almost like he's getting the project going, but it never quite gets musically evolved enough to say, okay, now we're at a record. The first couple records, specifically King, not to mention that he pushed Bully back over a day to land on No King's Day with a project that starts with a record named King. I can't imagine that's a coincidence. To me, that's the kind of thing that is an inside joke or an inside play or inside flex only to Kanye. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't seen anyone else talking about this, but I can tell you, me, myself, I don't see that as a play on nothing. I see that as a play on something, a sort of a secret flex that no one can really see unless you're in the frequency of Kanye. But I digress. And then it's not until you actually get to All the Love that you really get to see where he's headed with this project. At such an early placement at a number 4 record, to me, even at the beginning of King, you kind of hear Kanye say, he's addressing his wife, partner, woman, love interest, the person that he does all his sacrificing for, the person that he's willing to elevate with him as he continues to strive for his goals and his achievements and his passions within music. You find Kanye almost reassessing his decisions to see if they still carry and push the amount of weight that he originally thought. And with a guy that's so, I wouldn't even say he's misinterpreted or misrepresented or misjudged. I think he's judged in a way that he knows he will be judged. And I think that's what makes it so powerful, that whenever he does certain things, it's almost the audacity of what Kanye is doing, because that he knows that this is going to create this reaction, and it's within those reactions that he pulls you in, he pulls his audience in. But if it's one thing that we can always depend with Kanye, is timeless, dynamic, massive sounding music that belongs honestly in some kind of Hollywood-esque cinematic score screening. We're not talking about bells and whistles. We're talking about the creation of bells and whistles. We're talking about the creation of a sound, and where a lot of other artists choose to try to emulate the sound and say, hey, I'm going to change the landscape of art. I'm going to change the landscape of music. You're doing it at the tails of someone who is still doing it. And when I look at projects like this, and when I read things like this, yes, Ye had a great first day. Unfortunately, the streamings don't count for the first day, especially when by the end of the second day, Kanye is at 50 million streams. The most streams by a rap album this year. And with over 7 records charting on the Billboard, you have to think, wow, he's done it again. But he didn't do it as the old Kanye that a lot of people are suggesting is what they're hearing. He did it as the now Kanye. The Kanye that is trying to give you the essence of where you fell in love with his music, his production, with the samples, but also, restate and reassess himself as the top dog in singing, in auto-tune, the ideas behind the records, and the detail-oriented ways in which he crafts these records, both vocally and sonically, to give us an experience that doesn't just allow us to enjoy the music, but more importantly, gives us the opportunity to feel what Kanye is feeling. Not now, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not yesterday, but in music that is so timeless and that can carry so much emotion with just the sound of synths or the sound of samples or the use of samples, synths, and drums, that you can't help but feel the pain that Kanye is going through when you're listening to these records. And I would even argue that one of Kanye's number one superpowers is the ability to make you feel his emotion of the record, from that highs and lows, from that Preacher Man. He has lines like, and they seem to always revolve around his wife or his love interest or some sort of emotional attachment to somebody who he wants to not just share and give everything to, but also someone that he's willing to sacrifice what he loves, music, the creation of music, his career, even until the end of the record. This one here, where you can kind of almost hear him pleading and just letting somebody know that, hey, I can't give this up totally. This is what I've worked my whole life for. This is everything to me. You have records like Damn, where he kind of reinstates, his sentiments from Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and he's just like, did I ruin your plans? And then he has that one line where he's like, but have you smiled today? To me that shows a beautiful juxtaposition between being self-aware of how hard it is to maybe love him, how hard it is to maybe be accepting of where his time and his energy goes to, where he probably, like he says, there's so much of me you'll never actually get. Like, he's aware that he's not able to give her everything that he wants to give her because his goals and what he has set out to do in his life and his career is going to take way too much of that time to really become a reality for him. I think even the record Bully with Cee-Lo, I think, shines super bright because he doesn't have a ton of features, but he uses features so well, and he incorporates them into this record in a way where it doesn't seem overbearing. Also, the length of the records are very short, and it makes it to where there's occasionally a 3.5 minute record, but for the most part you're looking at records that are between 1.5 minutes to maybe 2.5 minutes, and it makes it to where the album and the records never overstay their welcome. The records never overstay their welcome, and thus when you get through the project at just over 40 minutes, you realize that, wait, I have to go back. And then you realize that some of these records and experiences that you had in the process of listening to this project aren't just experiences, they're actually multiple songs. But the blend of these records and the way that they come in and out are so well put together. I would even say that after song 7, the album actually resets. The album goes into square one, and we get that really beautiful Mother's Favorite record at the end, where we hear his mother talking and really justifying and validating that Kanye has always had her on his shoulder, telling him to keep going, telling him to be honest. Even when he has the record where he's like, hey, I'm honest, but I'm honest about everything. And that really makes you feel like, damn, like, this isn't a man that's looking for validation or acceptance. He's actually, for himself, he's actually what he's looking, in my opinion. And then again, look, guys, this is my YouTube channel. I listen to art and I critique art, and I try to dissect art in a way that is, to me, allows me to see something that the artist will never allow us to see. And I think that's my primary goal, is to say like, hey, let's analyze this, because this is what the artist wants. The artist wants us to analyze and say like, what did he mean by this? What did he mean by this or that? But for me, this album is not about him bullying anyone except himself. And you see that in the separation of Kanye and Ye. He wants to be good. He wants to be non-secular. He wants to be respected and he wants to be valued, but also the way that he has to do that is by creating music, by creating his passion, by working crazy hours to allow himself to continue to be as successful as he has been and always raise the bar. And there's something about people that are that to us, the average person listening or watching, that we label this as narcissistic. But the truth is, even in the record Bully, he's just like, it seems like what he wants us to know is that he's been right so often that he needs you to know that there's a good chance that his decision is what needs to happen. There's a line where he says, I hate that God didn't make more of me. Suggesting that it's not so much that he thinks he's the greatest, it's just he's looking at the scoreboard. He's looking at the music. He's listening to the greatness that he's created throughout the years, the consistency that he's created throughout the years, and his ability to try new things and still succeed. And say, why would I listen to you when I can listen to me? And that in itself has a very particular way of landing on people that suggests that maybe you're a little bit narcissistic, of course. But I think at the end of the day, we have to say, well, I mean, how right is he? How right has he been? Can we trust this guy to really take us to the next level? And I do think that with this project, he has done that. Everything from Sisters and Brothers to, like I said, Highs and Lows is just cinematic. Just power. It's just a powerful record. It reminds me of the vibe of like Stronger, without the like EDM vibes. And then you get into like White Lines and Circles and records that really lean on his original sound based on sampling and soul samples. And you have some beautiful samples in here with James Brown, which is like a meme. I think that's also showcases how well Kanye is versed in not just music and production and mixing, but also what's going on in social media, going on in like real life. I mean, obviously you could argue that social media isn't real life, but in reality, social media is a fragment of real life, and we've kind of grown to live with social media. So all of these elements really bring you together to listen to an album that, there's even a sample of Nelson from The Simpsons where he laughs, ha ha. I caught that. I sampled that years ago, like just kind of looking for sounds, and I just thought it was a kind of a funny sample to put in a beat. And it's all of these little moments and elements that create different moments for the listener, for the fans, and for someone who's willing and open themselves up enough to actually consume the record and try to understand where Kanye is coming from, try to understand what this album is really about, and And like I said, I really do think the album is more about him. It's almost like a cry for understanding, not a cry for help, because I don't think Kanye expects or thinks anyone can help him because of how elevated his thoughts are and ideas of what he can create and what he can achieve. So what he's looking for is understanding and trust from others to say, like, you have to trust that I'm going to guide you in the right direction. And, throughout all of his turbulence and trauma and things that Kanye has been through and gone through and experienced with us, there's times that whatever he did felt like it sided with the right side. And then there's other things that he did that it didn't feel like it did. But I don't think that any of those decisions carried malice. And I think that is one thing about Kanye, where we have to accept what he's done as just flaws in a perfect system, flawed in a genius mind, and flaws in a sea of success and genius moments. And I think once we start doing that, then, we can kind of take his opinions and his takes about anything in life with a grain of salt. With a Hip Hop Report, this is Rambo Hustle.
On now. Going down, it's your boy Juicy J. My hustle is our hustle, man. That's what you're watching right now. It's going down.
Poppin' is Kendrick Lamar, my dude Rambo. Our hustle, yeah.
Our hustle is our hustle.